My name is Frances Dorvatakis, and this presentation will cover seasonality as it relates to sports tourism. Seasonality is a temporal imbalance in the phenomenon of tourism, which may be expressed in terms of dimensions of elements such as the number of visitors, expenditure of visitors, traffic on highways and other forms of transportation, employment, and admissions to attraction. It is one of the most common characteristics of tourism, yet probably one of the least understood. Seasonality is not generally seen as a major issue in sport. However, with sports seasons changing and in most cases expanding dramatically, it has become a dynamic topic. It is studied by examining seasonal patterns and issues in a tourism context and then in a sporting context. Consideration is given to the factors that influence these patterns, followed by a review of sport-based strategies. It consisted of an analysis of tourism data from 16 prominent tourism destination countries, covering a period of 17 years. His work confirmed most statistical series of arrivals and departures of tourists, bed nights and accommodation, employment in hotels and other branches of the tourist industry show considerable fluctuations from month to month due to seasonality and other predictable factors which can be measured. More recently, Lopez Bonilla distinguished a number of different seasonal tourism patterns found across the most popular regions of Spain. His analysis demonstrates that patterns differ dramatically by region, even when they are relatively close in proximity to each other. In Canada, Stanley and Moore confirm that a peak travel season exists in July and August, with a decline in the fall, followed by slight upswings in December and February. They also found distinct seasonal patterns associated with tourists traveling for pleasure, visiting friends and relatives, traveling for business, and attending conventions. In contrast to those traveling for leisure purposes, convention and business tourists tend to travel in the spring and distributed their trips relatively evenly during the rest of the year, but for a marked decline in July. The prevailing view of tourism seasonality is that it is a problem that should be resolved by destination managers. Advocates of this position point out that tourism seasonality has many negative effects on the destination. Seasonality is seen as a problem due to underutilization of capacity at one end of the scale and congestion, environmental damage, saturation of transport infrastructure, increased risk of road accidents, higher prices, and a negative impact on the quality of the tourism product at the other. Different regions of the world report many of the same problems associated with seasonality, despite experiencing quite different patterns of seasonal variation. Seasonality tends to be more of an issue for destinations that depend upon specific climate conditions as attractions, rather than destinations where conditions provide an environmental context rather than the central attraction. With a few notable exceptions, little attention has been paid to the possible benefits that may be attributed to seasonality. Hartman argues that tourists' low season offers the only chance for a social and ecological environment to fully recover. A dormant period for the host environment is simply a necessity in order to preserve its identity. Similarly, Butler suggests that while areas may experience very heavy use during peak season, in the long run they may well be better off than having that use spread more evenly throughout the year. A significant part of the dynamic evolution of sport over the last 30 years has been the expansion of traditional sporting seasons. While the reasons for this development include an assortment of technological innovations, changing social conditions, and general forces of globalization, one of the most significant factors has been the evolution of sports at the elite level of competition. In conjunction with this trend, partnerships with broadcast media have generated pressures to increase the length of the competitive season as a business strategy. In many cases, the restrictions of functioning within a traditional sports season have been cast aside. The professional development of numerous sports where teams compete virtually year-round has in those cases largely eliminated the notion of sport seasonality. An example includes when sports seasons are altered to revolve around the summer rather than winter months. The development of all-season sport facilities represents another change that has facilitated the extension of sports seasons. Examples include summer skiing facilities in Scandinavia. For sports that are conducted in the outdoors, an assortment of equipment and clothing innovations have extended the range of climatic conditions in which they may be comfortably pursued. Notwithstanding these changes, it is evident that seasonal patterns still exist in sport. This is most obvious in the case of winter sports, such as those that require snow, or summer sports, such as sailing and scuba diving, which are much more attractive to participants in warm water conditions. The reality of these sport seasons has a direct impact on the seasonality of sport tourism. Tourism managers, planners, and policymakers have addressed seasonality issues in numerous ways. Responses have included attempts to lengthen the main season and/or establish additional seasons by diversifying markets, using different pricing and tax incentives throughout the year, encouraging staggered school holidays, encouraging distinct domestic and international seasons, introducing differential pricing at different times of the year, adjusting supply inventories, and introducing new festivals and conferences during periods that traditionally experience low visitation. Weaver and Opperman categorize these approaches into 6 basic strategic responses: increase, reduce and redistribute demand and increase, reduce and redistribute supply. Strategies that have the most relevance in a sport tourism context include changes to the sport product mix, market diversification, and the adoption of a leisure constraints framework to target unique seasonal barriers. Changes to the sport product mix individual sports are characterized by their own patterns of seasonality. By capitalizing on these unique characteristics, it is possible to manipulate seasonal patterns of tourism visitation in a destination. Seasonality is generally indicated by fluctuations of demand or supply in the tourism industry, caused by temporary movement of people due to factors such as climate conditions and public and school holidays. In terms of natural factors, temporary movement takes place because every country has different climatic patterns. The majority of tourism destinations are categorized with fluctuations in tourism activities throughout the year, whereby those fluctuations have a systematic and recurring pattern. Seasonal fluctuations in tourism volumes over a calendar year must be differentiated from long-term business cycles and short-term changes related to weekly and daily travel patterns. In particular, such fluctuations in visitors and revenues are almost universally viewed as a problem by the tourist industry, which spends considerable time, money, and effort to modify these patterns through the development and implementation of strategies designed to extend the shoulder seasons or to create all-season destinations. Seasonality has become one of the most distinctive and determinative features of global tourism industry. Despite the fact that seasonality is one of the most prominent features of tourism, it is also one of the least understood.